When we last left WCW in the fall of 1996, it was truly the beginning of the darkest timeline for the company. The New World Order had just completed their hostile takeover as a result of what happened in the War Games match at Fall Brawl. They're getting all of their demands met and all their conditions met. They're getting everything they ever wanted, and they'll never get that back. So who is left in WCW to stand up to the tyranny of Hollywood Hogan, Trillionaire Ted, the Outsiders, and the rest of the New World Order? We're going to find out in this week's review of Halloween Havoc 1996 from October 27th at the MGM Grand Garden Arena in Las Vegas, Nevada, the first of many consecutive Halloween Havocs they're going to run at that venue. This show was nominated by Alan Jolly over at patreon.com/wrestlingwithwregret. So the fallout from War Games is continuing to be felt in WCW as the NWO continues to envelop the company as we know it, because now they've got the condition where they can kind of have carte blanche to do whatever they want with no punishments being levied against them. No one can get in their way. They're starting to take over blocks of programming. You'll see this on WCW Saturday night for the next several weeks. They have this little segment called the NWO Saturday night where they have, members of the NWO fighting random jobbers, and you've got the Outsiders doing commentary in this big empty arena. They tape these matches before they open the doors, and it's all just a big rah-rah celebration of the NWO. It is very different than like anything else you're seeing right now because it's a big empty arena, but they've got like buttons for like the canned audience noises. You've got the shaky camera, the NWO referee in a ski mask so you can't see his identity. Like Syxx is doing the ring introductions and whatnot. It's all very silly, and it's supposed to be very counterculture to what the traditional WCW is, just kind of throwing their weight around as well. And of course, we've seen some NWO takeover of Nitro as well. And what of Sting? We saw what happened in the War Games match where the real Sting showed up to defend his character, defend his identity against the NWO Sting, the imposter who showed up 1 or 2 weeks before on television. No one in the WCW team believed that Sting was really on their side until he did show up, cleaned house, and then left. So then on the Nitro after War Games, he cuts this promo where his back is to the hard cam in a very symbolic sort of gesture, and he says that after the way WCW treated him after all the years of loyalty he has spent carrying the flag for the company, he's telling WCW now that they can stick it. And that begins, it's the start of his very long hiatus from wrestling. He does make one appearance before Halloween Havoc where he's kind of morphing into the Crow Sting. You see him come out with, the white face paint with some little gray lines in there. Ooh, the shades of gray, more symbolism. And he shows up there and you don't know what side he's on. He's not on WCW's side, but he's also saying to the NWO, if you want to get the real Sting, it might be a bit out of your price range. And he says, the one thing that's for sure about the Stinger is that nothing's for sure. And then he leaves, and this is the beginning of his time where he spends many months not talking at all. And he sits up in the rafters, and he's got the crow makeup on and everything. And this all is going to eventually build up to Starrcade 97, which we've covered before here on the classic pay-per-view reviews. But this is the beginning of that whole arc when Sting is disillusioned after feeling betrayed by WCW, and so he's going to be gone. So that's one more weapon in Team WCW that's going to be absent here as this NWO takeover continues, and we're going to see how else the WCW roster is affected as we go through this card. And before I get into that though, staying with the Sting topic, WCW in character is doing all this stuff to really kind of make it up to Sting. They have this whole video apology on Nitro to say how sorry they are, and Sting, you were right, please come back to us, Bubby. We love you, Sting. We're sorry. Please forgive us. And to show you how much we care, we're also going to put out this, WCW race car with your face on it. Isn't that nice? We put your face in a car. Please come back to us, Sting. We really miss you. And also, that's just part of like a larger thing because WCW is rolling out all these race cars. The WCW car. They have the NWO car driven by Kyle Petty. And then there's the monster trucks. Oh my God, they're showing off the monster trucks here. There's an NWO monster truck at one point. And then on this night, we're going to see the Macho Man monster truck. They love their four-wheel vehicles in WCW around this time, and this was the way they were kind of rolling them out. About 10,000 folks in the Garden Arena, breaking the company's live gate record. The show earned 250,000 pay-per-view buys, matching what they did earlier in the year at Uncensored and Bash at the Beach. Something that perked my ears up at the start of the show, the theme they're using for this is actually a song that would go on to be used a couple of years later in the WWF for Marvelous Mark Romero's entrance, and which is great, by the way. I love that song. That unlocked a real core memory for me because that was one of my favorite themes when I first started watching the WWF. It's like Tony Schiavone, Dusty Rhodes, and Bobby Heenan are on commentary, and they say tradition is on the line tonight, and they're talking about how Macho Man has had everything taken away from him, and Heenan says now Hollywood Hogan will take the beating of his life. Your opening matchup is a grudge match for the Cruiserweight Championship. These two longtime rivals locking horns once again as Rey Mysterio Jr. defends against Dean Malenko. Malenko is the former champion, lost to Mysterio, and he wants his belt back, and he's actually been walking around for the last several weeks with Rey's mask, which he stole right off his noggin a few weeks ago. It's a tale as old as time. Mike Tenay has joined commentary for the match as Dino gets right to work stomping on Rey. Tenay explaining the legacy of the masked wrestler and the importance of Rey's mask like he does. I love this opening sequence. Malenko is an excellent base for all of Rey's flips and dips. Dean stops what he's doing to talk to the mask for some reason, Rey making him pay for it. Then he gets the mask back and he puts it right back on. That would have been hilarious if they fucked that up and Rey just like dropped both masks and it's like, oh no! Dean dumps Rey legs first onto the ropes, right on that injured knee, and he gets to stretching him. Nice stalling vertical suplex by Malenko here. Back to more submissions. Rey keeps trying to fight out of it, keeps kicking out. They both go up top and they tumble to the outside. That was crazy. Rey slips on the barricade, can't quite get the move off, but they recover in the ring. Rey with a pair of great moves here. Another awesome sequence leading to some near falls. It's really hard to keep up with what's going on here. There's a really great counter sending Dean out of the ring. Rey hits this big friggin' move off the ropes into the floor. Dean catches Rey in midair with a big old powerbomb. This is some good stuff here. Then Dean follows up with a friggin' gut-wrench powerbomb off the top for the win. Dean regains the Cruiserweight Championship. I give it 5 stars out of 5. This is an amazing opening contest, and spoiler alert, this is the best match of the entire show. But what great chemistry these two have. Some fast-paced, really awesome action here, interspersed between all the times where Dean is kind of slowing things down and using his technical prowess, and Rey is just a human highlight reel at this point. These guys are both in the prime of their career, and even the biggest botch in this matchup, that one where Rey slips on the barricade, isn't even that bad because they recover from it pretty well. And when I think about this matchup here, I'm thinking, man, Rey Mysterio has a case for being like Mr. Halloween Havoc in a way, because just between this matchup and the one he has next year with Eddie Guerrero, I mean, those are two of the greatest matches WCW ever had, in my opinion. And so I think that's a strong case for, Rey to kind of stake a claim on Halloween Havoc as being his show alone. Lee Marshall's backstage with Jeff Jarrett, the relative newcomer to WCW who's filling in for Ric Flair tonight. Jarrett's all about honor, pride, tradition, he's got a few words for the Giant, with your monster chucks, you ain't done nothing inside the ring, and Giant, you will not chokeslam me, In comes Ric Flair, who says he's going to be in Jarrett's corner for this matchup, and he's saying, all the ladies are going to want to fuck Jeff Jarrett tonight, woo! And he says, Savage, as much as I despise you, tonight you and WCW will walk that aisle, style and profile, and take the Hulkster and the NWO all night long. Up next, a match for the Battle Bowl ring as the legal recipient, Eddie Guerrero, takes on the man who stole it from him back in August, Diamond Dallas Page. So DDP stole the ring right after Guerrero won it in the Battle Bowl at Clash of the Champions, then claims to have lost it. So what are they fighting for then if Page doesn't have the ring? And Nick Patrick's the referee for this one. Better look out for his shenanigans. And that's been a big storyline thread going through a lot of the programming in WCW right now, is that people are questioning whether or not Nick Patrick's actually working for the NWO, because in a lot of his matches he's been officiating, there's moments where he has times where at best he is being incompetent, and at worst he is showing malicious and ill intent, costing people matches, whether they're against the NWO or not. And so people are starting to question where his allegiances lie, and he's been up and down denying it, and people are saying, hey, you look a lot like the NWO ref in the ski mask, and saying, that's not me, it's actually Randy Anderson who's doing this, and I'm going to sue WCW if they continue this line of questioning. The fight starts up immediately. Eddie slowing Page down with some arm drags, works the headlock, some nice back and forth. Page is caught in the ropes. He's kicked out by Eddie, who follows him outside, throwing him to the barricade, and there's popcorn everywhere. Back in the ring for a little while, DDP gains the advantage, Nick Patrick having moments with his neck hurting and having bad calls that affect Page at first. Page getting mad at Patrick, Nick shoves him back, we get this near fall, then Patrick really gets gets in the face of DDP, so maybe he's not a heel ref after all. They fight their way through back-to-back near falls. DDP turns around and lays into Guerrero with a clothesline. DDP with a nice Charlie Brown bump. Eddie comes back. Big dive to the outside. You can see Eddie landing hard on his legs there. Back in the ring, Page drops Guerrero on the rope, hits the flapjack.
Flapjack. What? It's called the flapjack. Okay.
Followed up with a big powerbomb by DDP. There's a kick out. Finally hits the diamond cutter. Shoulders back, chest out, at ease. Page wins the match, and suddenly Nick Patrick reaches into his pocket and gives the Battle Bowl ring to Page. It was on him the whole time. I give it 3 stars out of 5. It's a pretty solid matchup here, but it's definitely by the end of the match feels like they hit a switch. I feel like after Guerrero hits that dive, they just kind of like something about the tone and the pacing of it just kind of really changes, and it feels, I don't want to say sloppy, but it definitely feels like they've just kind of like lost their energy and lost their spark, and they were just kind of going through the motions to the finish. But not to take anything away from the rest of the match, because I thought it was really strong, just the way they finished it to me felt kind of like a letdown. Backstage, we see Mike Tenay looking over at a giant Slim Jim. Oh, actually, in comes Randy Savage.
Oh yeah, I'm gonna kill Hollywood Hogan in the ring tonight, but first I need to draw a grand prize winner. Let me run over the Hulkster with a truck, yeah.
We then get a shot of Chris Jericho in the CompuServe web chat, and then we get some promo time from Dean Malenko. He's here to remind Ray that he was going to be super focused going in, and that he wasn't going to leave the MGM Grand without the championship. Up in the NWO zone, in the crowd, we see trillionaire Ted DiBiase and Vincent standing next to the Giant, who is holding the U.S. title that they stole from Ric Flair. DiBiase cuts a promo on Jeff Jarrett, repeatedly calling him a fool for taking the Nature Boy's place and going against the Giant. Giant says there will be no Jeff Jarrett and there will be no Horseman, and everyone goes to the glue factory. So we go to that next matchup. It's WCW versus NWO as Jeff Jarrett takes on the Giant. It was supposed to be Ric Flair taking on the Giant in this matchup, but a couple of weeks ago on Nitro, Flair got beat down backstage with a baseball bat and written off TV. He was actually going to go under the knife for rotator cuff surgery, and that was the way they took him off. And so Jarrett, who recently debuted for WCW, he's all about tradition and honor and everything, so he is just a bona fide babyface here going into this one, and he has the seal of approval from Ric Flair. Flair shows up at ringside for Double J as the match begins. Jarrett does some strutting, Flair does some strutting. Jeff just gets hucked into the air repeatedly by the Giant here. Jarrett fighting to hop up on Giant's back for the sleeper for a while, keeps going on the attack but walks right into a big boot. Giant starts showing off the power. Flair grabs the live mic to start shouting at both guys.
Yeah, we got a full member of the broadcast team. I want to...
Giant keeps putting on the beating, puts JJ in a bear hug. Jeff bites his way out of it, even tries to slam the Giant up, but he gets squished. Jarrett with a couple of top rope axe handles. A top rope cross body finally takes the Giant down. On the outside, Giant runs himself into a Giant Slim Jim. The figure 4 on the floor, but Giant just sits up and goozles Jarrett. I love that. Goes to choke slam him, but Flair hits Giant with a low blow. The match ends in a DQ. In come the rest of the Horsemen. Arn Anderson, Mongo McMichael, and Chris Benoit. They all chase the Giant off. The Horsemen and Jarrett high-five each other, which I think either that's getting booed or they're booing the Giant. 2 out of 5 stars for me on this one. I don't know what this is, but the pattern that I have seen when watching Jeff Jarrett debut in a new company somewhere around this time, that first matchup, man, it's always ending somewhat inconclusively to protect both individuals as it happens. But be that as it may, this was still a fine big versus little match. There were still a lot of fun spots in this one. And of course, this angle is really the beginning of the discourse that some people have had for a long time about, is Jeff Jarrett a Horseman? I think at this point, obviously, I don't think he is. He's just someone who's kind of latched onto the Horseman at this point. And I think later down the line, the more he aligns himself with Flair and the other members, I think there is an argument to be made there. But as far as I know, I don't know if he was ever officially put in that group, but maybe Wikipedia will correct me, I don't know. Back in the NWO zone, despite the DQ loss, DiBiase sees it as one mark in the win column for the NWO. DiBiase saying that Chris Jericho is a fine young athlete, but he's in the right place place at the wrong time. You won't win, but you'll get better when you wrestle Syxx. Syxx also puts over Jericho for being a fine young athlete. He says the Cruiserweight title will soon be in the hands of the NWO, which, as we all know, is for life. I love this crane shot of Syxx making his entrance, just being surrounded by security detail, going through the sea of the audience members as he makes his way down to the ring for his matchup against fine young athlete Chris Jericho. This is actually Syxx's in-ring debut in the company since being revealed as the 6th member of the group. And Jericho, he himself debuted for the company back in August as this, white meat babyface. And his first pay-per-view match for the company was at Fall Brawl in a losing effort against Chris Benoit. So we'll see how this one fares. Sitting at ringside, we'll see them a couple of times throughout the show. It's the Dungeon of Doom. That's the Taskmaster, Big Bubba, and Conan. The look on Bubba's face, he's kind of poking out between the two other faces, is very silly for some reason. Jericho off to a good start. He leaps up to the top rope, but Syxx kicks him off and Chris takes a big tumble. Syxx is firmly in control from here, just beats down on Chris for a very long time, hits this big elbow drop as Chris is draped over the apron. Syxx goes for an attack in the corner, but Jericho dodges it, fights back, hits a big triangle dive to the outside. Back in the ring, Syxx takes to the air, but Jericho intercepts him, hits the lion salt before they call it that. As the match goes on, Nick Patrick taking slower and slower counts for Jericho. It really becomes more noticeable. Jericho walks into a spin kick, Syxx with the cover. Patrick is right down there and makes the 3 count nice and easy for Syxx to win. Then after the bell, Jericho chasing Patrick out of the ring, and suddenly the man with the big neck injury moves very fast to walk out with Syxx. I give this one 3.5 stars out of 5. I think it's a great showing for both guys here, especially considering Syxx, this is his first match back in a long time, and Jericho, who is still relatively new in WCW, has a really good showing. I like the action and the back and forth in this one a lot. If you want to hear more about Chris Jericho and WCW, I recently did a whole video about that, and you can check it out right here. But this matchup also just goes a long way into building up more of the is he or is he not sort of aspect with Nick Patrick. Mike Tenay's backstage with Lex Luger, who looks like he hasn't conditioned his hair in a week. Heenan actually calls him Phyllis Diller on commentary at one point. Luger says he was ready to accept the blame for War Games, but it wasn't good enough for Arn Anderson. He had to question his fortitude and his courage. He says that Arn planted the seeds and now the harvest has come. But it's not a flowery garden, it's thickets of what to expect from Lex Luger. Also, you gotta show Lex Luger some love because on the week before of this show on Nitro, he was wrestling this big dude named Roadblock, and it took a few attempts, but God bless him, he pulled through and managed to get that big dude up for a torture rack, and the pop that he got when he did it after all those attempts was really cool. So on we go to that match as the total package takes on the enforcer Arn Anderson. Back at War Games, it was Luger who submitted for the team. The Horsemen, who are also teammates of his, they've not forgiven him for that. Arn calling Luger a big quitter, attacking him with a chair on Nitro, so that's how we get this matchup here. Anderson with the early advantage, doing a little mockery of Luger, and Lex flexes back, gets a nice little run. He rams Arn spine first right into the Slim Jim. We see the DOD cheering Luger on. Lex just beating that ass for the longest time, but all it takes is one spine buster that levels the playing field. Anderson beats Luger up on the outside to gain the advantage. Back in the ring, Arn goes for a DDT, but Luger blocks it. Lex starts to fire back up. He almost decks the referee, but Arn hits Luger, who then lightly bumps into the referee. Mark Curtis collapses. Arn grabs a chair, goes for a big old swing with it, but Luger ducks. Luger catapulting Arn into the Slim Jim once again. Now Luger has the chair, and he smacks the back jack 3 times. He picks Arn up back in the ring, puts him in the rack. Arn submits. The match is over, but Luger really putting the hurt on it. He will not let go of the rack for the longest time. That leads to Flair and Jarrett. They come out with the trainer. They're tending to Arn, who's all sorts of banged up, and they get a stretcher job for him. I give it 3 stars out of 5. I really enjoyed the story told in this matchup. It really comes full circle because Lex is like, hey, you're going to question my heart, and you're going to call me a quitter, and you're going to question my courage. Well, let's see how fast you quit when I put the torture rack on you, and we'll see how much you're hurting once I hold on to it for an extra long period of time. A very solid matchup here by these guys. Sadly, this is the beginning of the end of Arn's wrestling career because this is around the time his body's really starting to feel the wear and tear of what he's done. Like he's having a hard time maintaining his grip on weights on his left arm. And so this is the beginning of the end. Like he's not really going to be in big storylines after this. He was stretchered out, and that was kind of the way to write him off. And he's going to be wrestling getting less and less until about, midway through next year when he officially announces his retirement. Stagger Lee Marshall's in the promo zone. Hey, what's going on with Sting? You better call that WCW hotline to find out, kids. Let's bring in the tag team champions, Harlem Heat, along with their managers, Sister Sherry and Colonel Robert Parker, with his nice clean pants. He says the NWO are a bunch of bad eggs, they're in need of some beatings, and Harlem Heat's gonna give it to them. Sherry says the NWO is gonna find out what hurt really is. Before we go to that match though, time for another inter-WCW grudge match happening. You've got two members of the Horsemen and Chris Benoit and Steve Mongo McMichael taking on the Faces of Fear. That's the Barbarian and the Man called Ming. The match begins, Mongo tries to collide into Ming. Ming is not moving until Mongo just throws himself at him with a flying shoulder tackle. A couple minutes later, the two of them do some sumo stances. Mongo's just chop blocking fools, goes for some drop kicks. Ming blocks one and takes back over. The Faces of Fear then just do this whole series of big ass moves to Benoit. There's this backdrop into a powerbomb combo, followed up with a ridiculous top rope belly to belly, then a double flying headbutt. We get this suplex and splash combo. Holy crap. Mongo makes the save by dragging Benoit out of the ring, dinking Meng with a Halliburton, flying headbutt by Benoit, the cover and the win. After the bell though, Barb beating Mongo with a briefcase, a big pile driver in the ring, then in come the Dungeon of Doom. Conan grabbing woman by the neck. Benoit tries to fight back to defend her. It's 5-on-1. The numbers are just too much. The other horsemen, they are tending to Arn Anderson at the hospital. Woman gets in the ring, then Sullivan gets in there, stalks her and says, no matter what, he's still the man, and continues the beating on Benoit. That's all still hard to watch. I give it 2 stars out of 5. As fun and as impressive as that whole sequence with the Faces of Fear and Benoit just like doing move after move after move near the end, as entertaining as that all was, that was the big highlight. Everything else about the match, it was just kind of there. Mongo was Mongo at that point, and it was better than I'd seen him in some cases, mind you, but it was still just, outside of that part near the end, there wasn't much to the match, sadly. We go back up to Ted DiBiase in the NWO zone. He tells Harlem Heat there's nothing they can do to stop what's coming. And unlike the WCW guys who say, oh, give me another chance and I'll beat those guys, they don't need second or third chances. The NWO takes what it wants, and he introduces the next NWO tag team champs, Hall and Nash, the Outsiders. They are challenging Booker T and Stevie Ray, who are defending the honor of WCW and those tag belts. Hall and Nash are just being real big pricks from the get-go. They steal the belts and pose with them. Hall throws the toothpick in Booker's face. He gives us the gif. Booker gets some early offense in on Hall, who then spits in Stevie Ray's face. Nash gets in and hits some knees. Stevie fires up on him. Sherry gets in her shots as well. Nash comes back with a side slam and tags in Hall. Nash with a cheap shot on Booker T on the apron. That allows the challengers to take over. Sherry gives Scott a slap on the apron, and Hall responds by giving her a big old smooch. Shouldn't Colonel Parker be getting up on the apron to fight for the honor of his woman or something? Because that's the whole thing. They're star-crossed lovers, and they become, a romantic duo while they're managing Harlem Heat. I would have liked to have seen more fire from Colonel Parker there. There's a big collision in the middle of the ring that leaves both Booker and Hall laying. Stevie gets the hot tag, picks up Hall, and just throws him into Nash. Harlem Heat's got the match won. There's the Harlem hangover, but Nash enters the ring. Colonel Parker comes after him. Parker gives Nash the cane out of self-preservation. Nash using it to clock Stevie with it mid-cover. Hall makes the cover. They win the tag titles. The NWO continue to gain power. This one gets 3.5 stars out of 5 for me. This is a really entertaining matchup here. I think both teams are in fine form. Hall and Nash, their star power really shines through in this one. At the same time, you really see how devious and evil they're being as part of the NWO and doing their big takeover. They gave a lot to Booker T and Stevie Ray in this matchup as well. I mean, it felt like a classic match that kind of hit all like the big tag team match points, and it was very well done. In your main event for the WCW Championship, and for the first time in company history, these two are squaring off in singles competition as Hollywood Hogan defends the title against the Macho Man Randy Savage. Of course, it was back at Bash at the Beach when Savage took the leg drop heard around the world. He's been gunning for Hogan ever since, but has been taking quite the beating since Bash at the Beach. Meanwhile, Miss Elizabeth, who recently had been running with the Four Horsemen, of course, she turned on Randy Savage a while ago to join up up with Flair, etc. Her WCW contract was running out, and so the NWO picked up on that opportunity, offered her an NWO contract. Hey, you get to be a movie star now. And so she takes the bait, and of course, Hogan turns around and basically treats her as his slave, and is really bringing down Elizabeth's buzz, and she's very upset. She doesn't want to be part of it. Meanwhile, she still does seem to have feelings for her ex-husband, Randy Savage, and wants to try to explain her side to him, but he wants nothing to do with it. Finally, she makes this video message where she's sitting at the tree where they both used to spend so much time talking, saying she still has feelings. I still feel the same way about you as I did when I said I do, which makes Savage go near catatonic. He can't even wrestle Mike Enos in his matchup here on Nitro. And so then you see this footage of Hogan on the set of his Three Ninjas movie, and he's like harassing Elizabeth and getting right in her face and being real mean. You're just gonna do like I tell you to, brother. And then Savage is all like, you know, marriage is fragile and life is also fragile, yeah. So that's how we're building into this. And like when I watched that scene with Hogan, I'm like, hang on. Like, now, I wasn't watching live when this was happening. I didn't start watching until a little bit after this. And I'm going, are we meant to take Hulk Hogan seriously at this point? Because this is the guy who has a chokehold on WCW right now. The evil NWO, hostile takeover in WCW. And this guy's, oh, I'm a Hollywood actor, dude, I'm in all these movies. And like we see you in your goofy ass High Noon on Mega Mountain suit, you're plugging Santa with muscles coming out. You tell us how much you hate the kids, but you're making movies exclusively for kids, and we're supposed to buy you being this real asshole when you're dressed like this and berating Miss Elizabeth? Like, at least when The Miz was doing his Hollywood gimmick, like, we weren't supposed to take him seriously, and he was not nearly in the same position on the totem pole that Hogan is here in WCW. So, like, what is it? Are we meant to take him as this, like, real evil baddie, or just this guy who's all bluster? Hogan's in the NWO zone. He's wearing his cool hairpiece that he wore for the Three Ninjas movie, says he's done body slamming Hollywood for now and is about to take out a lovesick puppy named the Macho Man. Savage makes his entrance. He calls out for something in the back. It's the Macho Man monster truck. Wow, that's gonna help. The Giant is removed from ringside, but not Trillionaire Ted, and the match is on. Lots of stalling, lots of shtick to start things off, but before we know it, Savage takes Hogan's sunglasses, then his hair. The toupee is off, and Savage is wearing it. Now, that's funny. A chair comes into play, the referee is distracted while Hogan gets to clubbing. The deal, if you will. Suddenly, out comes Miss Elizabeth, wearing her most colorful shoulder-padded dress. But whose side is she on? There's a full moon in Vegas as Savage tries to get a quick win. Hogan now using Liz as a shield. Oh, how the turntables, Macho. Hogan hits the big boot. Finally, Elizabeth has had enough and gets into the ring. She throws herself down in front of Savage. Hogan goes for the leg drop, but he misses. He's got a foreign object handed to him by Trillionaire Ted, but Liz takes it from him. We get a referee bump, and holy Moses, says Tony Schiavone. Nick Patrick has come in. Savage is ready for the flying elbow. He hits it. Nick Patrick with the 1, the 2, but owie, my neck, I can't count the 3. We get the Patrick flop. Hogan goes to use the object, but Savage takes it and decks Hogan with it. Savage's up top again. DiBiase pulls him off. Savage goes after him. In comes the Giant, who hits a big old choke slam on the floor. Giant puts Hogan on top. Nick Patrick able to make the cover. Hogan wins and retains. The Giant has produced a big bowl full of ice water, immediately spills half of it, uses the rest to wake up Hogan. Hogan then grabs the mic and gets to gloating, asks who else is left. He's bored, brother. What you gonna do? Then suddenly we hear bagpipes, and it's Roddy Piper, followed by some guy. Piper making his WCW debut just weeks after last being on TV for the WWF as their interim president. So this is a big deal. This was kept a big secret. You know, this was not something that was spoiled in the dirt sheets or anything like that. So this was a genuine surprise to see Hogan's old nemesis from the golden era of the WWF showing up here in WCW for the first time. Hogan looks like he's seeing a ghost here. Piper's saying he's here to break Hogan's monotony. Hogan tries to play nice, kind of backtracking what he says. You know what I said about being the only guy who ran wrestling? Well, you and I were actually neck and neck, brother. But Piper tells him to shut up. He's not here to represent the WCW, the NWA, the SPCA, the SOB, but he can be an SOB if he wants to be. He says he's as much of an icon as Hogan, as big a movie star and multimillionaire as Hogan, Hogan, and he says they didn't hate him so much would they have loved Hogan as much. He brings up WrestleMania, beating up Mr. T and having his way with Liberace, huh? Hogan keeps trying to steer the conversation back to something else, but Piper keeps going his own way. Hogan even admits that Piper is also a big star. He puts his hand out, they shake, Piper tells him to straighten up, Hogan makes a snide comment about his kilt, and then it's back on. So Piper and Hogan continue to talk to each other, and Piper even says, "I made you bald." And that's a great line to get in there just before the cutoff, because they are ending the program. Like, the satellite feed is going to cut any moment, so Tony's like, "We're out of time, we gotta go, bye," and Piper's still talking as they fade to black, and that's how Halloween Havoc ends. And well, WrestleMania 5 this ain't. This is kind of a dud compared to the kind of matches that these individuals have had against each other. And it's kind of disappointing. I think that it doesn't really jive well with the build to this, where Savage is being tormented and tortured every week and brought back with a memory of Liz, where he says, marriage can be fragile and life can be fragile. Like, threatening he's going to kill Hogan. And then there's really not much of that in this one. So also Elizabeth being there, there was something there with that appearance, and you feel they could have gone more with it. But it just felt like it didn't really hit for me. So, I think Piper showing up at the end and making that debut was a really nice save to kind of have the fans sent home happy after the disappointment of Hogan winning. But of course he was going to win. But yeah, you just kind of wish the match were a little bit better. Got a little bit overbooked, a little too messy by the end for my liking. That being said, my grade for WCW Halloween Havoc 1996 is a B. Still a pretty strong show. I think that, I loved the opener, and I think the show ends really strong with Piper's debut. And once again, the under and the mid card is doing a lot of the heavy lifting in service of the main event in a show such as this. But I think, still a breeze to get through, a lot of good moments, a lot of fun moments throughout the show. And yeah, the NWO, it's not gotten stale yet. They're still chugging along with this storyline. There's still a lot of intrigue there. So I think that the conflict within WCW, as well as the overarching threat of the New World Order, I think it's all being handled pretty well here. And the in-ring action, by and large, is really good. But what did you think of Halloween Havoc 96, folks? And how about this review? Let me know in the comment section below. Be sure to give the video a thumbs up if you like it. Subscribe to Wrestling with Regret. Hit that bell icon for all the notifications. Well, recently, WWE brought back their Bad Blood pay-per-view property, and so in honor of that, 2 weeks from now, I'm going to be reviewing the 2003 edition. Stone Cold Steve Austin takes on Eric Bischoff in the Redneck Triathlon, Chris Jericho finally gets his pay-per-view match with Bill Goldberg, and Triple H defends the world title against his bestest buddy Kevin Nash in Hell in a Cell. I'm Brian Zane, and I'll see you next time.